So, post World War I in Europe, you had lots of trains going on, you had some motor cars coming into the picture, but the one big thing that changed the face of Europe going forward was air travel. So this is your pilot for your flight today. There's 10 of you on board, and you're flying from London to Paris in the early 1920s, and we're going to watch it in action, gracefully recolored and audio designed by the NASS channel. Check them out. They've got amazing stuff. And here we go. So, in what used to take a day or more of travel by rail and by ship to get over the British Channel, instead, you could hop on this plane for the same or cheaper price than the boat would cost and be there in 2.5 hours. Obviously, we don't need to contrast too much with today, but the boarding procedures obviously are quite different, and they're boarding a plane that looks quite different and operates quite different. They're actually in the plane called the Handley Page W8. It's a British-designed biplane. There we go. And in the post-war era, they had a lot of aircraft that were like military bombers that were being converted over to passengers. But this was one of the first ones that was designed specifically for passenger comfort and not just a converted military bomber. Now, they did have a cargo hold, and you could see when they were loading it on, they each had their bag, and they're each limited to 50 pounds of weight, so that they knew exactly how much weight they were going to be taking off with, more or less. This would have been the first time almost anyone had seen these areas from the air. London at this time, as they're flying out, had approximately 7.4 million people in it in the start of the 1920s. It was the largest city in the world at this point, but by 1925 it would be overtaken by New York City. Incidentally, we don't see a lot of Paris at the end of this, so I'll share the stats early. There were 2.9 million people there, and that was the absolute historical pinnacle for the population of the city of Paris. It's actually more populated in this 1920s footage than it is today. Okay, so the aircraft, which you saw kind of a bunch of the interior of, did have a lavatory, which would have been a first airliner designed with one. Maybe that might be the only difference between the military converted craft and this one. Except they also had, oddly enough, wicker furniture inside the cabin because they were specifically so lightweight, and they weren't really even bolted down. So during turbulence was an interesting experience. What else was I going to say about the? So you can see they're in a passenger compartment here, but the pilots are actually in the front in an open cockpit, and you'll see a glimpse of them, I believe, in a minute. So they were actually like exposed to the elements, so they had to install their pilot goggles on and everything. These planes didn't fly very high, so you get some pretty low altitude views of the English and French countryside, as well as the channel there. And there was actually Here's their snack and entertainment. The entertainment is the view out the window, and the snack dining that the stewards actually serves them in their little wicker style chairs. Some tea time. There you go. Look at that biplane. That's so wild. So they actually passed by a second plane on their way across, which is pretty cool. Now, where they're landing in France is the Le Bourget airfield. It was also the scene in 1919 for the first international air show. It also is one of the most famous events that happened at this airfield was when Lindbergh landed the Spirit of St. Louis after the first solo non-stop transatlantic flight, when there was 150,000 people came to the airfield to see him. There were others that took off around that time as well to try to do transatlantic. The French pilots Charles Neukesser and Francois Colli took off from this airstrip here as well to try to cross the Atlantic and disappeared, and the mystery was never solved in what happened. There's a great museum there now, and it's one of the few places where you can see two Concorde jets side by side, both the French prototype and the Air France production model. This is actually the home of the French National Air and Space Museum. So really, this was the center of the aviation world, but it's wild to me that we don't actually see the city of Paris in much detail in these shots. There aren't passenger manifests from this era, so we don't have detailed records of who flew in these flights, but they became very common, and British royalty took these flights a lot, as well as other A-list commuters. And one of these planes actually had its engine fail, and it was still landed, and nobody was injured. There we go. Still feeling like a hero. You're flying into there today, you will see a lot more development, and not just a grass field with a few hangars. It'll be interesting to see how many people were actually just entrepreneurial pilots and plane owners at the time, but obviously they created airlines industry at this point going forward. Would you ride in one? I sure would. It looks amazing. Oh, you see they had curtains in the windows. I didn't know that. Did they have glass in the window? It wasn't quite apparent to me, but they weren't being blown around too much, so I assume that there was some glass in those windows. I could be wrong. Not to get some stairs out instead of these ladders. Where someone breaks their ankle. I'm amazed at the remastered quality, the 60 frames per second quality of this London to Paris by Air in color video. Check out NASA's channel, and it's a really good work with the audio and really amazing coloration. Bravo. Hope you enjoyed the ride. There it is, 2.5 hours. Oh yeah, there still was some arrival ceremony here, or bureaucracy, you could say. People getting their passports checked, asked if they brought any stuff. I don't understand exactly what kinds of things they were not permitted to bring in, or why, but they do say here that playing cards and matches were confiscated. So I don't understand. I should have done some research, but not a lot has changed when you land, and everybody wants to know your business. All right, thank you.